Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 455 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm not only asked you to agree with me, I'm asking you to hear me out. Where I want to start this episode off with is explaining how Bryce Young has pretty much became the poster child for the downside of being a number one overall pick, especially at the quarterback position. It was announced after the Panthers lost to the Chargers 26-3 in week 2. It was announced that Bryce Young will be benched for Andy Dalton. Now, I don't know if you've seen a lot of Andy Dalton, especially recently, but Andy Dalton is not at the level of a starting quarterback or the level that the starting quarterback should be. But that says everything about the Panthers' belief or lack thereof belief in Bryce Young now. If it stands that Bryce Young is done in Carolina, this will be the fastest a team gives up, a team benches, a team pretty much scraps a number one overall pick in NFL history. This is the same NFL that had Jamarcus Russell, that had Ryan Leaf, he was number 2, but that had Johnny Manziel. Bryce Young, it seems like he's essentially done in Carolina. Now, let me first talk about Bryce Young and where Bryce Young is at fault. And I want to say first, because the saying is football is the ultimate team sport, which it is. We've seen that on a given basis. You can have the best offense ever. You can trot out an offense with Patrick Mahomes or prime Tom Brady, prime Randy Moss, prime Jerry Rice, prime LT. Like, you can have the best offense ever, but if your defense is trash, it doesn't matter. You're not going to win anything. Obviously, you'll win games, but you won't win the ultimate prize. Football is the ultimate team sport. So what I'm going to focus on first is where Bryce Young went wrong. First and foremost, we're talking about a person in Bryce Young that dominated college football. He has a Heisman. He has a national championship. He was the starting quarterback for the Alabama Crimson Tide. His numbers are up there in college football history. He was, yes, there were some doubts, but most of the doubts that he should be a high draft pick, most of the doubts were because of his size, not because of the fact of if he could play or not, because everyone knew Bryce Young could play. Bryce Young was good enough to play. But in the league, in fact, my point is, the league is much different than college. We've seen some player. The best example that comes to mind right now is Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel was electric in college football. You know what? Let me not say Johnny Manziel, because a lot of the off the field stuff is what derailed Johnny Manziel. Another perfect example is Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow, you can argue, is one of, if not the greatest college football player we have ever seen. Yet he will go down as one of the worst NFL quarterbacks we have ever seen. The talent level is just different. The things that you're able to do, you're able to get away with, you are not going to, not all everything obviously, but you're not going to be able to do that in the league. I think the biggest hindrance of Bryce Young is his height and his size. He's a short, smaller in stature player. Now, I understand that the poster child for short quarterbacks, or the magnum opus of short quarterbacks, is Drew Brees or Russell Wilson. But historically, smaller quarterbacks don't usually work. I know when they do, you want to say, "Hey, look at Drew, okay, cool. Kyler Murray's doing his thing." But historically, smaller quarterbacks don't work. You're playing behind 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 350-pound linemen. It's kind of hard to see over them. But if you're Bryce Young, the Panthers had a horrible season last year, and Bryce Young wasn't good. You're hoping that from year to year, you see improvement. From the first 2 games that we saw this year, we have not seen improvement. Now, yes, you can say a lot of it is because of the height. And a lot of it is because he's a smaller quarterback. He struggles with seeing defenses. He struggles with seeing over the line. He struggles with seeing the field because of just how short he is. And I would say, yeah, that's probably true. That is a good and rightfully so. I'm not saying you're wrong. But what I will say is, when you're expected to grow, not in height, but you're expected to be better than you were a season ago. Especially when you were as bad as he was year 1. Well, in 2 games, there was no improvement. Like, none. His game, the way that he was playing, warranted him getting benched. And on top of that, man, you don't want to lose a locker room. And a move like this could do one of 2 things. You could lose the locker room, or you can galvanize the locker room and say, yeah, we understood that Bryce Young, did not give us the best chance to win. You see, last episode I talked about Bryce Young, or maybe 2 episodes ago I talked about Bryce Young. And I said I wasn't ready to call him a bust. And while, as crazy as it is, I'm still not ready to do that. He has currently the bust label. And honestly, because I know this question's going around, if he doesn't rejuvenate his career, because again, I think his career is over, or I think his time in Carolina is over. But if he doesn't rejuvenate, if he doesn't go to another team and remind people of how good he could be, especially what he was in college, if this is the last iteration that we've seen of Bryce Young, not only can we confirm that he was a bust, but he will go down as arguably the worst or biggest bust in NFL history. Seeing where he was drafted, seeing what the Panthers gave up to get him, and there was absolutely no success in the NFL. And I hate that, because that brings me to the second part. That brings me to the part that Bryce Young can't control. Everything that Bryce Young could control, it didn't work. So it's not just on Bryce Young. I mean, it's not just the fact of the team let Bryce Young down. There were things that, I mean, again, you're expected to get better. It just seemed like that he couldn't. His confidence was done for. And that's one thing about professional athletes. That's one thing about especially football players, when your confidence is done, when you don't have any more, when your confidence is shot, on top of that, you lose time after time. I mean, he had zero touchdowns and 3 interceptions just this season. Usually, you lose a player like that, and it looks again. I think he's done in Carolina. But let me get back to that second part. I think a famous thing that we like to do as fans, as analysts, is compare. I think that's one of the easiest ways. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that people are taking the easy way. I'm not saying that people are copying. No, I think it's one of the easiest ways to dissect the game is compare. Look at what you're seeing and compare it to something that we've either seen before or not seen before. And when we talk about Bryce Young, the obvious thing to do is compare him to what we're seeing out of C.J. Stroud. Seeing as though their NFL stories will always be interlinked. C.J. Stroud, a lot of people were, and you hear Frank Wright and people talk about it, the Panthers wanted to get C.J. Stroud over Bryce Young. But higher ups, David Tepper, the owner, he wanted Bryce Young. And obviously they made the trade, this, that, and the third, with Chicago, which ultimately lost them Caleb Love and Rome Odunze. But to each his own. But I don't think we give that C.J. Stroud situation the proper microscope that it deserves. When you're a high draft pick in the NFL, in any sport usually, when you're a high draft pick, 9.9 times out of 10 you're going to a bad team. That's why they were able to get you. Unless you see some crazy trades, which you usually don't see in the NFL, you're going to a team that was terrible the year before. And it takes a good team, a smart team, to understand how to get yourself out of a bad situation while hitting on draft picks. I said we don't give that C.J. Stroud situation the microscope it deserves because it is extremely rare. And I don't think maybe he does, but I don't think we as fans understand the bullet that C.J. Stroud dodged not going to Carolina and instead ending up in Houston. Look at everything that has happened with Houston since C.J. Stroud's got there. You got Tank Dell. You have Nico Collins. You have Stephon Diggs. You have Dalton Schultz. You have Joe Mixon. You have a new head coach in DeMeco Ryan. You have a defensive star in Danielle Hunter. You have Laramie Tunsil, a great offensive lineman. You have Kearse Labisser, I forgot to say his name. I apologize, bro. Out of Georgia, rookie cornerback. What the Houston Texans have done is they've given C.J. Stroud the best opportunity to win. Because, again, football is the ultimate team sport. If you get drafted somewhere, and another person we'll talk about a little later in the show is Caleb Williams. It is tough going to a team You see, let me say it like this. When you're the number one overall pick, especially at the quarterback position, you're looked at as the savior. You're looked at as this is the person that's going to turn this franchise around. Because obviously being a number one overall pick at the quarterback position, the franchise needs some changing. But it takes the good organizations to know that while they can be the savior, they can be the franchise changer, like a CJ Stroud, it's going to take work from the organization to help him. Because again, people forget these are still young players. These are still rookies at the end of the day. Why did I talk about CJ Stroud so much? And this is a Bryce Young topic. You can almost say it has been malpractice what the Carolina Panthers have done to and for Bryce Young. What the Carolina Panthers, what it looks like they've done is they drafted Bryce Young and said, "Hey, yo, go save us. Go save us. We're not going to help you with nothing. We're not going to give you a good offensive line. We're not going to give you. In fact, we're going to take pieces away from you. We're going to take pieces like DJ Moore away from you. We're gonna make a bunch of moves, but our best players like Brian Burns, yeah, he's gone. But he's good. You're good. You are going to take us out of obscurity. Forget all these other players. We're just going to get a bunch of names. We're going to get Adam Thielen, who's pretty old in NFL terms. We're going to we're not really going to address the offensive line because you're good, right? In Alabama, you were a mobile quarterback. You're good. Alabama, you won the Heisman. You have records at Alabama. We're good. You got a national championship. We're good. While yes, Bryce Young, there are things that he should have been better at. But the real problem of this story is the team did not help him, which is why he has all the accolades as a bust. Since being in the league, he's damn near last in all the important quarterback categories. But the Panthers did not help him out at all. In fact, in the contrary, they did everything to hinder his growth. Whether we talk about not providing an offensive line, whether we talk about not giving him suitable pieces outside of this year's draft in the wide receiver position, they had Frank Wright and fired him after Bryce Young's first year. I started this off by saying that Bryce Young has pretty much turned into the poster child for the issues, the problems that could arise as a number one overall pick, especially at the quarterback position. The worst thing that ever happened to the Carolina Panthers is Cam Newton. Cam Newton was the absolute worst thing that has ever happened to the Carolina Panthers. I say this a lot, and I hope that I am doing a good job at explaining what I mean when I say this. Success is not always a positive for situations. Sometimes success can be the last thing that you need. Cam Newton's success as a rookie, Cam Newton's success in 2015 taking the team to the Super Bowl, I think it gave the ownership a false sense of how important it is to build a team. Because Cam Newton, especially that first year when he was breaking all the rookie records and, throwing for 400 yards the first two games, that year, the Panthers really didn't have anybody. In fact, majority of his career on the offensive side of the ball, the Panthers really didn't have much talent when Cam Newton was the quarterback. But Cam Newton was still breaking records. Yeah, well, Cam Newton's also like 6'6", 6'5", 270 pounds. Cam Newton is one of the greatest college football players we've ever seen. Cam Newton is a physical specimen. But because Cam Newton succeeded with little to nothing, I think it put in Carolina's mind, if we get the right quarterback, he can concede. I mean, he can succeed with nothing. That has to be the case because they have given Bryce Young nothing to succeed with. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, because I'm going to talk about Baker Mayfield, I'm going to talk about Sam Darnold. They didn't really give Sam Darnold anything to succeed. They didn't really give Baker Mayfield anything to succeed with. And now you're starting to see, when we look at how Baker looks in Tampa, when we see at least the first two games, how Sam Darnold looks in Minnesota, and how drastically different they looked at Carolina, there's a common denominator in all this. The Panthers. I feel bad for Bryce Young because a lot of the factors that got us here has everything to do with him, but nothing to do with him at the same time. Obviously, Bryce Young is the topic of conversation, but the Carolina Panthers is the real villain in this movie because they did everything possible not to put their franchise quarterback, and they viewed him as a franchise quarterback because he was number one overall. They did nothing to help him. And what's unfortunate about this is Bryce Young is the one that's going to have bust on his jacket, not the Panthers. The Panthers have been a poverty franchise since I can remember because they have done everything wrong. They did everything wrong with Cam Newton. They did everything wrong with Christian McCaffrey. They did everything wrong with DJ Moore. They did everything wrong with Brian Burns. Every turn. Oh, and they did everything wrong with Bryce Young. Every single turn they could have gone right, they went left. And they essentially, very possibly, could have ruined a young man's career because their lack of knowledge of how to run a competent organization. I talk about poverty franchises all the time. One of the biggest issues with a poverty franchise is the careers they ruin. Somebody is going to have to put their faith in Bryce Young. And that's the issue, because on tape, he has really done nothing in the NFL to warrant that trust. So while the Carolina Panthers are going to keep going, they're going to keep selling tickets. this is yet another situation where they ruined somebody's career potentially. I don't want to call Bryce Young a bust because he's still young and there's still time. Maybe no more time in Carolina, which might be the best thing for him. But I think there's still time to revive his career. He just needs to go to the right situation. I think the issue is, and where we'll leave it is, the problem is Carolina continues to be the wrong situation for damn near every single quarterback. It sucks. It sucks. I wish nothing but the best for Bryce Young. Man, but let's move forward. And I think this whole episode, we're going to break down what we saw week 2 of the NFL. And where I want to go next is the emphasis of this episode is probably going to be what I said in the talking about Bryce Young, that it is an ultimate team sport. Moments, and I talked about this before, moments dictate games. Moments. Maybe one play here, maybe 2 plays here. Moments dictate winning and losing in the NFL. And it takes everyone to get the moment right for you to ultimately succeed. The Falcons beat the Eagles on Monday Night Football 22-21. The reason why I'm talking about moments and the reason why I'm saying that everyone has to be on one accord, or you're going to lose the moment. And ultimately, losing the moment can ultimately lose you the game. While the Falcons did win 22-21, they should have never been in a position to win. There were a litany of issues. Or let me backtrack. There were a litany of moments that could have gone and should have gone the Philadelphia Eagles' way. We can talk about the Saquon Barkley drop on the third and 3 down in their red zone with like a minute and 50 seconds or a minute 30 seconds or something like that. We can broaden that and say, why are you running? You still have timeouts, I believe. Why are you, and you have a minute 30 in your, in scoring position. Why are you throwing a pass on 3rd and 3 with like a minute left? Especially when Saquon Barkley has been gashing the Falcons. Now, yes, I will admit that, especially the second half, the Falcons did a better job at stopping the run, but still. Why are you running a pass play, which, if the pass play doesn't work, it stops the clock? If Saquon Barkley drops the ball, it stops the clock, which helps nobody but the Falcons, who are down in this. I think it was like 15-21 or 15-18, who are down in this situation. You can talk about the fact of after you kick a successful field goal, you give the Falcons a minute and like 38 seconds to drive the length of the field. And they do it in succession. Like Kirk Cousins was looking like prime Big Ben. Just boom, boom, boom. I want to say congratulations and kudos to the Atlanta Falcons. I think the one title and one thing that has been attached to Kirk Cousins that has followed Kirk Cousins his entire career, whether we talk about when he was in Washington, in Minnesota, and now in Atlanta. One thing that's followed Kirk Cousins is he is not good in primetime games. For a good minute, he had like a 0 and something record in primetime games. He just didn't win primetime games. And over the last few years, while I'm not saying that he's completely turned that around, he has won primetime big games, because this is a big game. I'm not going to go as far as RC said, because he went and said that this pretty much saved the Falcons season. I'm not going to go as far as saying that, but I will say that 1-1 looks drastically different than 0-2. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but still. A team that is young, a team that is looking for veteran guidance, which that's what Kirk Cousins brings, that's what Matthew Judon brings, that's what Jesse Bates brings. You look for any glimpse of hope. And having two games that you essentially should have won, but ultimately lose, that could wreck a locker room. Not saying completely bring it apart, but the morale would go down extremely low compared to losing the first game, which you probably should have won, and coming back, having a 2-minute drill, coming back and ultimately winning against a team that a lot of people are saying should be in the Super Bowl this year. That's a huge morale boost. So I do want to say shout out to the Falcons. Kirk Cousins played a good game, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns. Bijan Robinson, 14 carries for 97 yards. Darnell Mooney had a touchdown. Drake London had the game-winning touchdown. Shouts out to the Falcons. But I think that this was more about the Eagles. I'm not casting a doom and gloom cloud on the Eagles right now. It's just one game. And yes, while everything I said about the Falcons, as far as the difference between 1-1 and 0-2, that is the same thing for the Eagles to a certain extent, because they're obviously on the losing side of this, even though they should be on the winning side. The Eagles, whether again, it's a group from Jalen Hurts, from the offensive line that wasn't great, Saquon Barkley dropping the pass, the coaching staff for putting them in the position to even have to make that pass or take that pass when you should have just ran the ball, run more clock, not allow Atlanta damn near 2 minutes to go down the field with all the weapons that they have. It was a collection of issues. It was a collection of errors that cost the Eagles Monday Night Football. Mind you, this is the same Eagles team that, if it wasn't for a couple of breaks, they would be 0-2. They could have definitely lost to the Packers in game 1. Now, obviously, if was a fifth, you know. But still. The biggest issue that the Eagles faced last year was the coaching staff. And Nick Sirianni is still the head coach. But you have a new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. And the same thing that I got on Brian Kelly about when we were talking about when LSU lost to USC, and it seemed like Brian Kelly pointed every finger to everyone else but him, and how he's had a track record of doing that. Nick Sirianni did the same exact thing to a certain extent after this loss, pretty much putting it on Kellen Moore. I'm not saying that this is a make or break. I'm not saying that the Eagles season is over. Obviously, the Eagles could have and should have won this game. But there are some people that have things to prove on this team. One of which is Nick Sirianni and the coaching staff. And through 2 games, they have not looked great. At all. Nick Sirianni pretty much alluded to the fact of, I think the reporter was asking, he was like, yeah, Kellen Moore, he's the offensive coordinator. I am the head coach. When talking about, why they elected to pass the ball on 3rd and 3 instead of run the ball and allow clock to tick, which is pretty much deflecting blame. But yeah, you're the head coach. You can see, wait, why the hell are we passing the ball? Why don't we run it? We just need 3 yards. The defense was a huge sore spot last year, and the defense was getting gashed, missed tackle after missed tackle last night. And honestly, in week 1, I feel like the Eagles, if the Eagles would have played better opponents, and this is no offense to the Falcons, this is no offense to the Packers, but if they played better opponents, they would get smoked right now. And this is a team that I said is going to compete for the NFC position or NFC spot in the Super Bowl. Again, this is just 1 week, but it feels like Philadelphia did everything in their power to lose this game, and they ultimately did. So, shouts out to the Falcons for if you listen to what RC said, save the season. Shouts out to y'all. Let's move forward. You know what's funny? When you hear fans and people talk, they'll always say the truth, but in their mind, their logic, their emotion should essentially supersede, or the allure of entertainment should wipe away all the logic in the situation. So the Kansas City Chiefs beat, for the, I think, 4th time in a row now, beat the Cincinnati Bengals 26-25. Joe Burrow had a good game. Patrick Mahomes, he pretty much outplayed Patrick Mahomes, even though you give Patrick Mahomes time in the fourth quarter, 9 times out of 10 you're going to lose. He has turned into the Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers back in the day, like, oh, you left him too much time. I remember saying that. And I said, oh, you left Joe Burrow? I mean, you left Patrick Mahomes that much time? Oh, yeah, you're losing, bro. But I started off this segment this portion, because the talk around this game isn't how you had a late game lead that you obviously blew in the Bengals, or how costly the unsportsmanlike conduct was on Jamar Chase because he wanted a hip drop tackle penalty when If you look at the replay, it wasn't a hip drop tackle. The story of this game is the Chiefs having the ball, driving down, and it's a 4th and 16. Again, I'll say that again. It's a 4th and 16. If the Chiefs do not convert a 4th and 16, the game is over. You have beaten the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 1-1. You guys are 1-1. The talk the next day is all about how the Chiefs can't beat Joe Burrow, or Joe Burrow has a winning record against the Chiefs. That's what it's going to be. So 4th and 16. Patrick Mahomes gets out the pocket, scrambles, throws the ball to seemingly the only open receiver for a second in Rashee Rice. And before Rashee Rice can catch the ball, the Cincinnati Bengals defender hits him in the back, causing him, but hits him in the back before the ball gets there, causing him to not be able to catch the ball. By the letter of the law, that is a pass interference. And shocking, what do you know? It was called a pass interference, which set them up for a game-winning Harrison Butker 51-yard field goal. So you hear people, oh, you can't call that. That's the second time in a row, or that's yet another time where a ref has dictated the game. That's yet another time where this is the best one. Yet another time where a bang bang play was called. That wasn't a bang bang play. If you listen to every single person like that played in the NFL, that analyzed the NFL, if you listen to every single person, they say, yeah, that was a pass interference. While no, you don't want the game to end on a pass interference. You don't want the game to be dictated by that. You don't give a pass interference. You heard that with the Super Bowl. It's like, all right, well, if you don't want James Bradbury's pass interference to affect the game, don't pass interfere. In all intents and purposes, man, I think the Bengals played an okay game. They played a good game. The defense was playing like they had something to prove. Like, this was probably the best defensive game I have seen the Bengals play in a while. And like I said about the Falcons and Eagles, it's all about moments. If that wasn't a pass interference, the Bengals would have won the game. You get the ball back, you just take a knee. But that's not what happened. Now, you're 0-2. T. Higgins still ain't there. And that obviously would help tremendously. And I think the thing that's helping the Bengals is they have an easier schedule. They have a pretty easy schedule. But as of right now, the Chiefs beat them. Now, the Chiefs have issues of their own. This is the second game in a row where I saw Taylor Swift impact the game more than Travis Kelce. Isaiah Pacheco is out with, I think, a broken fibula. So he's out 6 to 8 weeks. And they have to bring in Kareem Hunt. Mind you, okay, guys, look. I understand the name is good. I don't think people respect the NFL or any league to a sense of there's a reason why these people have an FA in front of their name. I'm not saying they're going to be trash. I'm not saying they can't play. But trust and believe, if they were game changers, they wouldn't have FA in their name. Isaiah Pacheco, he is uber important for this team. And I think even if you bring Kareem Hunt, and I know Kareem Hunt had his glory days in Cincinnati. I mean, no, in Kansas City, but that's not the same Kareem Hunt that you're getting. Just like, what would you know? The run game we'll talk about that in a second. But I will say shout out to the Cincinnati Bengals. They played a really good game. They just ultimately, their mishaps caused them a game against the defending champions who are now 2-0. Shouts out to the Chiefs, man. I don't think I heard something. I don't think that the Bengals are scared of them, but I say this every single time, bro. And obviously, it's easier said than done, but I say it every single time, and it's been proven every single time. You have to play a perfect game against the Chiefs. If you do not play a perfect game against the Chiefs, you're going to lose. Or, I'll say this, you're going to give them a great opportunity to win the game. The Baltimore Ravens played a really good game. Game 1, it just wasn't enough. And a couple of moments dictated the whole game. The Cincinnati Bengals played a really good game. If Homie did not do the pass, if Homie did not have pass interference, they would have won. But if was a fifth. So, shouts out to the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's talk about it. Now, there is two parts of me that is going to discuss this Saints and Cowboys game. One part of me is obviously a Washington Commanders fan and how beautiful it is to watch the Dallas Cowboys lose. It's such a divine thing, you know. Especially when you see them lose in the manner of which they lost, losing to the Saints 44-19. It wasn't even close. Yo, Alvin Kamara had 20 carries for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think he had 4 touchdowns on the day, but 3 of them were rushing. It was a complete domination. And I will say shout out to the Saints. I think years of unmet expectations kind of got me off of the Saints, which is why when you saw me discuss the NFC South, and I was like, I mean, the Saints, they have an opportunity to be the best team, but I don't know because they usually have a really good team. They just never really meet expectation. Well, I think every single drive this season by the Saints have resulted in a touchdown. I think that's a fact. Derek Carr has been hooping. Alvin Kamara has been. This team is rolling, both defensively. I'll say this. If the Saints continue to play like this, which I think it's virtually impossible to play this good every single week, but if they're able to keep up some semblance of this offense and this defense, if they're able to play like this even close, they will have something to say about who will represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they will make the Super Bowl, but this team, they have played like the most complete team in the NFL. Their defense is humming. Their offense is prolific. There's nothing that the Saints have. There's no weak spot in the Saints right now. Now, again, It's just 2 games. I will preference everything that I'm saying is it's just 2 games, but in those 2 games, you'd be hard pressed to find a better team. I'll say this. The Saints have looked like the best team in football, and that's including the Kansas City Chiefs. The Saints have looked like the best team in football by a long shot. And as a Commanders fan, it is exciting and beautiful to see the Cowboys lose. But then I'm going to take my bias out of it. And I'm going to say that this is the fear that you have with the Cowboys. The Cowboys have names. You have Dak Prescott, who didn't have a terrible game. Passed for 293 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, but, he didn't have a terrible game. You still have CeeDee Lamb, who had a touchdown, who had a big game. Michael Parsons, the defense didn't really show up at all, but you have Michael Parsons, Dexter Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs. You have some names. DeMarcus Lawrence. And none of them, outside of Dak and probably CD, really showed up to play. And even Dak, he had 2 interceptions. I know one of them really wasn't his fault. The wide receiver just slipped. But this is the fear that you have. On the high end, the Dallas Cowboys have a shot of being a really good team. And usually when we talk about the Dallas Cowboys, they are one of those teams that have an exceptional regular season. But this is what happens when you continue to rest on your laurels, even though your laurels is only good in one aspect of the game, meaning there is not much talent outside of the names that I said, outside of Dak Prescott, outside of CeeDee Lamb, outside of Michael Parsons. There isn't or DeMarcus Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs. There isn't much talent on this team. Deron Bland's out hurt. What I was just talking, I could have swore Dalvin Cook was on this team. I could have swore Ezekiel Elliott was on this. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. So they can't be workhorse backs like they've been their entire career anymore? Shocker. Again, I will preface this by saying that it's only week 2. But this is the worst that the Dallas Cowboys could look. And yeah, it's good when you play a team that you're better than. When you play a team that you're supposed to beat. But what happens when you play a team that is looking at you eye to eye, or a team that a lot of people say could and should be better than you? You can get games like this. I'm not saying that they're going to lose 44-19. But when you pay Dak as much as you pay Dak, when you pay CD as much as you pay CD, and you're going to have to pay Michael Parsons, this is just one. And on top of that, you really don't make any free agent moves. You don't make any draft moves. You don't really do anything. You just rest on your laurels. This is what happens. The offensive line ain't that good anymore. And you caught the Saints at the absolute worst time. Because the Saints are rolling. The Saints are, boy, until I see it, the Saints are the Saints right now. And, yeah, week 1 looked good. But, you played the Browns, who have a really good defense, but struggle mightily offensively. when you play a team that kind of has their identity and knows what they're doing, you lose 44-19. But shouts out to the Saints for beating the Cowboys. There's a difference between 2-0, 1-1, and 0-2. Obviously. That quote is enhanced when you fall into a category that you don't believe or you didn't foresee yourself being in. The Titans, while we're going to talk about them, the Titans being 0-2 looks, feels much different than the Baltimore Ravens being 0-2. The Giants being 0-2 feels much different than the Baltimore Ravens being 0-2. And you're starting to see, which I didn't really notice it until now. I don't know if the Ravens essentially know how to overcome adversity. Obviously, we'll have to see. But I don't know if they do, because they haven't really, as an organization, they haven't had much adversity. They've been pretty much good their entire, maybe after 1 or 2 years they weren't, but they've been good majority of their tenure as a NFL team. But there is adversity running rampant in this organization right now, because the Baltimore Ravens find themselves 0-2 after losing to the Raiders 26-23. Let's talk about the positives for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson has looked pretty good. Lamar Jackson has been the saving grace of this team. The connection that Lamar Jackson has with Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely is saving this team. Well, I'm not even going to say saving, but keeping them relevant. Lamar Jackson looks great. Now, obviously, 0-2, it's to what level of greatness, but Lamar Jackson has been really good. Zay Flowers has been really good. Isaiah Likely has been really good. But that's pretty much where the positives stop. The two biggest fears that the Baltimore Ravens had going into this season was, how will the defense be affected with a bunch of change? Again, I don't think you understand just how much they lost last year, whether we talk about Jadeveon Clowney, whether we talk about Geno Stone. They lost Patrick Queen. They lost and their defensive coordinator. They lost a considerable amount of talent from last year. On top of that, while yes, you still have some excellent mainstays like Roquan Smith, like Kyle Hamilton, like Justin Madubuike, like Kyle Van Noy, even though he's out, like Marlon Humphreys, but he's getting older. You still lost key pieces that helped your defense be historic a year ago. So that was one issue. That was one fear. Like, you didn't know how the defense was going to fare after all that turnover, especially the defensive coordinator. The other fear is, how is the offensive line going to fare? Because, again, the two biggest units that got affected this offseason for the Ravens was the offensive line and the defense. Offensive line is pretty much an entirely new offensive line. And what do you know? The two positions that have cost the Ravens mightily these first two units that have cost the Ravens mightily these first two games is the offensive line and the defense. Offensively, the first game against the Chiefs, Chris Jones was wreaking havoc. The second game against the Raiders, Max Crosby was going crazy. Every time you look, you see the picture. Every time you look, Max Crosby was in the backfield. It's like, oh, there he goes again. Oh, is nobody going to touch Max Crosby? Oh, okay. I guess the offensive line isn't going to offensive line is not going to play today. All right. I think the Ravens are going to take time to gel as a unit, which I think that there is a level of panic, but not completely hyperbolic, go crazy. I think that there's still, especially when you see the Bengals are 0-2 and the Browns are 1-1 and the Steelers are 2-0. I don't know how much the Steelers are going to be able to keep up. Even though I will talk about them shortly and how happy I am and congratulations to them for being 2-0. But I did say that the NFC or AFC, North is the best division. But the Ravens, the defense continues to get gashed, bro. You gave up 276 passing yards to Gardner Minshew. Now we know Gunslinger Gardner is just going to throw the ball all over the place, rightfully so. But this Ravens defense was historic last year. When you look at your schedule and you see that the first 2 weeks is the Raiders or the Chiefs and the Raiders, at worst you're expecting 1-1. What you're not expecting is 0-2. You're not expecting Justin Tucker has already missed, I think, 2 kicks. The most automatic kicker in NFL history. And shout out to the Raiders, though, bro. We had a vintage Devontae Adams game. Again, goes back to the defense. They were getting torched, bro. He had 9 receptions for 110 yards. I don't know if he had 110 yards 4 times last year. And he had a touchdown. And before I leave this, I have to look at John Harbaugh and the coaching staff. You're hearing a lot of analysts say it, and you can see it. This team does not have an identity. And a lot of it is not because of the players, it's because of the coaching staff and the scheme. You'd think a team that led the league in rushing last year and brought on Derrick Henry would think to themselves, I think this is a perfect opportunity to lead the league in rushing again. And I understand that, John Harbaugh came out and said that Derrick Henry they didn't bring him to do 30 carries. That's just not smart, especially on his body. When you talk about his age, Derrick Henry just isn't at that position to do that, and understandably so. But this is the second game in a row that they've completely abandoned Derrick Henry in the run. And they become extremely predictable because when Derrick Henry's in the game, the defense knows they're running the ball. When Justice Hill's in the game, the defense knows they're passing the ball. It's like until they find their identity, which they have to find it fast, and it's not going to get any easier. They play Dallas on Sunday. When they need to find their identity. And for the life of me, I'm not saying that you have to rush Derrick Henry 30 times a game. But what I'm saying is, if it's working, why go away from it? I understand that the offensive line not being good is helping. But again, Derrick Henry had 18 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. That's not Derrick Henry. Until the Ravens find an identity, they're going to keep losing. And they don't have an easy schedule to figure it out. They have another desperate. I understand. I think the Ravens would be the more desperate team because they're 0-2. 0-3 is damn near a death sentence in the AFC West or North. But you're about to go against another team that is desperate to win because they just lost in epic fashion. So if the Ravens don't, and you're about to go against Michael Parsons. If you couldn't stop Chris Jones, you couldn't stop Max Crosby. Good job trying to stop Michael Parsons. But shout out to the Raiders for beating the Ravens 26-23. So let's move forward. I started this show talking about Bryce Young and talking about how I think the Bryce Young story is more of how the organization let him down more than him being essentially a bust. I also talked about, and the theme of this episode is football is the ultimate team sport. That might even be the title of this episode. The struggle with having a mobile quarterback, especially when you're not used to having a mobile quarterback, is understanding how to protect said quarterback and how to keep them healthy long term. Sunday Night Football, the Texans beat the Bears 19-13. Now, I understand that Caleb Williams is a rookie. I understand that it's going to take Caleb Williams and all the rookies essentially time to adjust, time to adapt. But the difference between Caleb Williams and, let's say, a Jaden Daniels, the difference between Caleb Williams and, let's say, a Bo Nix is he's getting punished more than them, way more than them. And what I mean by that, and again, I also understand that he is trying to use his legs a lot more than them and trying to make nothing out of something in damn near every play. But, his offensive, Caleb Williams, why do I keep saying Caleb Love? Caleb Williams' offensive line is by far, when we talk about Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, is by far the worst out of the three. And you're starting to realize why the Bears have not had quarterback success since, Jay Cutler? The Bears have always... The issue with the Bears is they have a Super Bowl caliber... Let me back up. They have a talented team that's just not healthy right now. Keenan Allen is not healthy. Rome Odunze hurt his knee. You have DJ Moore, but he was unhappy. You saw that. And the defense is powerful. But the Bears, if you do not, there's no question that Caleb Williams is better than Bryce Young. No question. And I think that Caleb Williams is going to have a long, successful career. But that thought is in jeopardy if they do not put him in the right position to win. And he keeps taking a beating. I know it was 2 games, but he's taking a beating both games. And because the offensive line isn't that good, the rushing game's not that good. Herbert is not doing much. Bro, Caleb Williams was the leading rusher with 5 carries, 44 yards. Again, it goes back to 2 things. It goes back to the fears and the issues of being a number 1 overall quarterback going to a team that essentially doesn't really know how to put the pieces around you to help you. And on top of that, all the criticism is going to go to Caleb Williams. And I think he's going to have a great career, but this is yet another game where he didn't look great. But a lot of it is because, bro, he was running for his life majority of the game. Now, yes, I understand that the Texans is a different level of good, but still. Look at this picture. For people, my DSP audience, I apologize. You're not going to be able to see it. But my YouTube audience, look at this picture. The man is about to get demolished. And that is how it's been these first 2 weeks. Shouts out to the Texans. The Texans are still going to take a minute to figure out. Again, I think C.J. Stroud had 1 touchdown, and then the rest were kicks. But Caleb Williams is not going to have a long career if they don't address, especially when you look at his play style. If he doesn't either change his play style, which I don't know why he'd do that, seeing as though that play style was what got him the number 1 overall pick, got him the title of a once-in-a-generational player. But if he doesn't change his play style, or the team doesn't really shore of that offensive line, he's not going to have a long career, unfortunately. So, but shouts out to the Texans for beating the Bears. Yeah. Shouts to Texans beat the Bears. 19-13. You know, it has been recorded several times on this podcast how, I guess you can say, hard I have been on Baker Mayfield. Whether we talk about his stint in Cleveland, Carolina, LA, and now Tampa, I have been extremely critical. Baker Mayfield has not been great in his previous stints. And I think Baker Mayfield is a perfect example of what happens when you get into the right position, the right team. Because, dare I say, Baker Mayfield has arguably been a top 5 quarterback this year. Again, I know it's early. I know it's two games, but Baker Mayfield has been an elite quarterback these first 2 games. The Buccaneers beat the Lions 20-16. Now, I'm not going to take away anything from Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, but I do think that this was more of a Lions lost this game. It was just a bad game compared to the Buccaneers won. I mean, the Lions, I think, had 5 red zone trips that all resorted in field goals or something. And Jared Goff, this team had over 400 plus yards and only had 16 points. So I think that this was more the Lions lost than the Buccaneers won. But I will say Baker Mayfield looked great, man. Baker Mayfield has looked great. His connection with Chris Godwin has looked really good. His connection with Mike Evans has looked really good. The rushing game has been really good for the Bucs. This is a good team. And Baker Mayfield has been, I believe, a top 10 at least top 10, maybe even top 5 quarterback this year. A person that looked to be out of the league just a couple years ago is now, at least these first 2 games, a top at least 5 quarterback, in my opinion. So shouts out to him. And shouts out to the Buccaneers for beating the Lions 20-16. Oh, boy. The Jets beat the Titans 24-17. We talk about identity, and I said how the Ravens don't seem to have an identity. Well, we saw right before our eyes the Jets find their identity. The Jets. Let me first say, I pray, sending prayers up to Jerome Johnson. I know he had a season-ending, I think, ACL tear. Really promising young player, and I think he had injuries last year that kind of affected him. So I hope for a speedy recovery. He was going to be extremely important for the Jets. So I hope for a speedy recovery. But I was saying is the Jets, that first game against the 49ers, it didn't really look like they had an identity. They didn't know if they wanted to run the ball. They didn't know the connection with Aaron Rodgers and some of the receivers or just some of the play calls just didn't look good. Well, when you play against a team that is also trying to find their identity and struggling, it allows you to jumpstart some things. And they looked great, man. They didn't have, it wasn't a prolific game by any stretch of the imagination for Aaron Rodgers of the Jets, but Breece Hall looked really good. Aaron Rodgers threw a beautiful pass to Garrett Wilson. It's looking more and more like a competent team. Again, only week 2, but still, it's looking more and more like, this Jets team can be really good. The defense played pretty good in some areas, but yeah, man, shouts out to the Jets. For the Titans, Will Levis, when he looks good, when he's making easy plays, when he's playing within himself, he looks pretty good. I'm not going to say he looks elite. He looks pretty good. He looks like a really good quarterback. Then you have those times like we saw game 1 where he tried to flick the ball, I guess, out of bounds, and it was caught for a pick 6. And then week 2, bro, the Titans had all the momentum. They were possibly going to go up 14-0. The Jets looked like they couldn't really get anything going. And Will Levis tries to throw the ball while falling, like flick it over to his teammate. That is behind him, by the way. Odd pass. The teammate couldn't catch it. Boom. Turnover. They score. The Jets score on the next drive. Essentially going from a 14-0 game to a 7-7 game. Will Levis is the biggest question mark for this Titans team because when he's playing well, they have a good shot of winning. When he is not, or let's say when he tries to be Superman, yeah, nah. Shouts out to the Jets for being the Titans 24-17. Again, man, I'm not saying that for the longest I have been, and I talked about this week one, I have been a Sam Darnold apologist. I've been on Sam Darnold's number one fan train, but I got up off that train a while ago. And shout out to Sam Darnold and the Vikings for beating the 49ers 23-17. Yo, Sam Darnold threw like a 94-yard passing touchdown to Justin Jefferson. Now, Justin Jefferson did leave with a groin injury, but he had 4 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown. And a lot of those 103 yards was on one play. So the Vikings look really good, man. I didn't think the Vikings were going to look this good, especially with Sam Darnold. The Sam Darnold has looked great. I guess this is what happens when you put the quarterback in the right position or right system, kind of like Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. The Vikings have looked good, and they're one of the rare teams that are 2-0 right now. The 49ers have some problems, bro. Looks like Deebo Samuel is going to miss some time with an injury. Brock Purdy did throw for 319 yards, but he also had 1 interception, 1 touchdown. And looks like they put Christian McCaffrey on IR, but they're saying that he can miss up to 6 to 8 weeks. This team has a lot of issues. Not a lot. This team has issues that could come back to bite them. Again, we saw what happens when Brock Purdy didn't have his top receiver nor running back last year, and now you're going to miss them for a good portion of the or some time. So, I don't know, bro. There's only so much the defense can do. So, we'll see. But shouts out to the Vikings for beating the 49ers 23-17. Hey, man. My Washington Commanders got their first win, albeit without scoring a touchdown. They won 21-18 against the Giants. Look, I said, yo, Washington, do not embarrass me, bro. And they tried their hardest, bro. Yo, Jaden Daniels, I don't think he's thrown a touchdown yet. I know he has 2 rushing touchdowns, but I don't think he's thrown a touchdown. He had 226 yards. Brian Robinson, 17 carries, 133 yards. But Malik Neighbors, 10 receptions for 127 yards. If he would have had that fourth quarter catch that he just hit off his hands, they probably would have won the game. I think it's obviously still a rookie. It's going to take time for Jaden Daniels to adjust to the speed of the game and to see, his receivers and to see the game just better. But we almost lost to the Giants, and I think the only reason why we didn't lose to the Giants is because Daniel Jones is not that good. Our secondary is god awful, bro. It's boy. We might finish the season with the worst secondary in football. I'm just gonna throw that out there, cause, bruh, I'm happy for the win. Shouts out to Austin. Was it Shepard for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kicks. But Our defense is not. If we don't improve it, especially our secondary, which it don't look like we probably won't, uh, it's gonna be a long season for Washington, bro. But we beat the Giants. Thank God for that. Good Lord. Shouts out to them. Shouts out to Washington for beating the Giants. Yet another game where Daniel Jones didn't look good. He looked better than game one, but you were also going against a poor secondary. But, yeah, shouts out to the Commanders. Oh, look. This is the second game where the Jacksonville Jaguars had every opportunity to win the game and didn't. The Browns beat the Jaguars 18-23 or 18-13. Deshaun Watson didn't have the best game, even though he ran for a touchdown. And I think, ran for a touchdown. The offense still doesn't look good, even though Jerome Ford did have 7 carries for 64 yards. That's not that good. Trevor Lawrence outplayed Deshaun Watson, but in the Browns defense, again, they were on the field for so long because the Browns offense still just isn't looking too good. The Jacksonville Jaguars should have won this game. Yeah, but they didn't. And that is what's plagued the Jacksonville Jaguars since Trevor Lawrence has been there. They've been in opportunities. They've been in situations to win. They just have not been able to capitalize on it. And I don't know how many times you're going to get an opportunity to capitalize, And I don't know how many times it's going to be forgiven that you don't. Again, these first 2 weeks were 2 very winnable games. And if it wasn't for a fumble in week 1 or a couple fumbles in week 1 and just poor execution in week 2, the Jacksonville Jaguars should be 2-0. But we're living in reality here. They're not. Sucks to suck. Shouts out to the Browns. I heard Emmanuel Acho was like, is this Deshaun Watson? No. Deshaun Watson did not look that good 90% of the game. He looks better than week 1, but nah. We'll see, though. Let's move forward. I will say this. I feel like another person I've been overly critical on is Justin Fields. I think it's because I would like Justin Fields to succeed. I do not want a situation like Bryce Young is finding himself in. And that's why I was happy when I saw that Justin Fields went to the Steelers. Now, with him being at the Steelers, he has not put his best foot forward, I don't believe. Or maybe he has put his best foot forward, but it just hasn't been enough. Yet, as we sit here, the Steelers are 2-0. And Justin Fields, while he's not playing exceptional, he's not playing bad. He's playing good enough to win games. Now, granted, he has played 2 teams that aren't that good, but still, you won both of them. And at this point of the season, they don't need Justin Fields to win. They just don't need him to lose the game because the defense is just playing out of its mind right now. It does help that you're playing against Bo Nix and the Broncos that have a god-awful offensive line, but still. Justin Fields has done just enough to win the game, and I'm giving him a shout out for that. I don't know if once Russell Wilson gets back healthy, I don't know if Justin Fields has done enough to keep a starting spot, but I do know that he has played well, and he has not lost them games. Right now, there's only one team in the AFC North that is undefeated, and that is the Steelers. So shouts out to Justin Fields, and shouts out to the Steelers for beating the Broncos 13-6. This is yet another game for the Broncos where Bo Nix looked all of like a rookie. 246 yards, 2 interceptions. Now, I don't think it helps that you played two extremely good defenses, one in the Seattle Seahawks, one in the Steelers, but, still, shouts out to the Steelers. So, speaking of those Seahawks, the Seahawks beat the Patriots 23-20. I don't know how to really address this game. I mean, the Seahawks won. DK Metcalf had 10 receptions for 129 yards and a touchdown. That was wide open for it. Geno Smith had 327 yards. But the Seahawks, in all intents and purposes, haven't really looked that good this season yet. They did beat the Broncos and now the Patriots, but those are two teams that you should beat. And they in both fashions they didn't look great. So I don't know. The Patriots, I don't know how long you're gonna go before you bring in Drake May. I know you did just beat the Bengals game 1, but Jacoby Brissett looked horrible. So I don't know. There's a reason why people are backups, There's a reason for that. And that's no offense to Jacoby Brissett. That's just the reality. And I don't know how long you're going to go until Drake May plays, but and I'm not saying this is doom and gloom for the Patriots. Again, they're only 1-1, but still. There was the Seahawks tried everything in their power to give the game away, and the Patriots just didn't want it. So, shouts out to the Seahawks for winning. So, talk about right situation, man. Malik Willis, who I completely forgot was in the league until they said he's going to be playing for an injured Jordan Love. I didn't think there was any situation where the Packers were going to look good without Jordan Love. And to my surprise, I was wrong. The Packers beat the Colts 16-10. Malik Willis looked good. He didn't have eye-popping numbers, but he looked capable. Bro, it's always crazy to see the organizations that know how to treat and know how to protect their quarterback compared to the ones that don't. Look at how good Malik Willis looked in Green Bay, albeit one game, compared to how he looked all of Tennessee. Or look how Malik Willis looked in Green Bay compared to how Caleb Williams is looking right now behind that offensive line in Chicago. Not saying that Malik Willis is better, but I'm just saying he looked really good. I was like, oh, shoot. I thought they were going to get destroyed, bro, against the Colts. Now, I think it did help that, DeForest Buckner went out, and the Colts are just facing injury after injury on the defensive side these first 2 weeks, but still. Shouts out to the Packers, bro. And look, they also are saying, hey, we're not going to make Malik Willis do a lot. Josh Jacobs carried the ball 32 times for 151 yards. He couldn't be stopped. He could not be stopped. That's the recipe. Malik Willis, just make the plays that you need to make, but we're going to run the ball majority of the time. If that works until Jordan Love gets back, hey, shouts out to the Packers. And for the Colts, man, this is yet another game where Anthony Richardson, he had flashy moments, but he also had 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions. And all of those interceptions were his fault and did not look good at all. There's only, again, there's high highs with Anthony Richardson, and there are low lows with Anthony Richardson. So if you are able to maneuver in the middle, you got yourself a really good quarterback. But if not, you're going to lose 16-10 to the Packers. So, which is a good defense. So I'm not saying it's, playing a good defense definitely helps in you struggling, but still, you looked all like that to the Texans are a good defense too. You know what I'm saying? And another team that is just ravished with injuries, bro. And I think this is the last thing I'm gonna talk about. The Cardinals beat the Rams 41-10. It is crazy looking at this Rams team and how every single week something happens. Now Cooper Kupp is out and gonna miss weeks. Puka Nacua is out. Damn near the whole offensive line is out. Damn near most of the defense is out. In 2 weeks, you just see people dropping like flies. And Kyler Murray was exceptional. Marvin Harrison Jr. was exceptional. 4 receptions for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyler Murray had threw for 266, 3 touchdowns. James Conner, 21 carries for 122 yards. It was a complete domination. But again, everyone is hurt for the Rams. Like everyone. It's until they get healthy, they really have no shot, like at all. So, and there you have it, man. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I'm not really going to talk about college football. Shouts out to Texas for being number 1 now, or UFC. Sean O'Malley did lose to, I do not know how to say that guy's name, but shouts out to you. And the UFC at the Sphere was incredible. It was one of the greatest spectacles I've ever seen. Obviously, I wasn't there. I was sitting in the comforts of my home, but still, like, it was, the images, the videos that I saw was spectacular inside. I would love to go to the Spheres one of these times. So, but shouts out to them. And that's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate all of you guys. If you like what you're seeing, if you get to this point, like an hour and a half in, and you're not subscribed, I don't know what to tell you, bro. But if you like the content and you know someone that's not subscribed, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, and it definitely means a lot. Please subscribe. Also, please subscribe to the DSPs. I understand that some people only listen to me on YouTube. Some people only listen to me on DSPs. Wherever you get your Unpopular Podcast, whether it's Apple's Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud, Pandora, wherever you get your DSPs and you're listening to the Unpopular Podcast, please subscribe. It means a lot. Also, please follow the socials. Follow Instagram, follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily there. That's where we can go back and forth and debate. That's probably the quickest way to get to me. Keep it respectful, and I don't mind going back and forth. It just means that you're listening to me and you are passionate about whatever you're talking about, so I appreciate you guys. Until next time, much love.